Hello, how's it going? Welcome. My name is Andrew, and this is Solid Rocket Future. We cover the most exciting parts of human spaceflight and rocketry. Now, today's launch is not going to be a crewed mission, but it is an exciting mission. Today's mission, of course, is a launch from ASTRA. ASTRA unfortunately did experience a loss of vehicle after the second stage ignition on their last mission. We are standing behind ASTRA and hoping that they have a successful launch today. But because this is a relatively new launch vehicle, this is something that we consider an exciting part of what's happening in spaceflight right now. We're currently standing by to wait for the official live stream to start, which looks like it should be starting in about 4 minutes. Today's official live stream is being hosted by NASASpaceflight, but we are now we're able to host the launch as well. We're able to show their video stream and provide commentary. So thanks for everybody for joining us today. We should be getting going real quickly, real shortly here. If anybody has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those for you. But in the meantime, we can go over some of the information about today's mission. So let's go to Astra's Twitter account here. Today at 9 a.m. they made an announcement, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We're honored to announce our partnership with Spaceflight Inc. to accelerate access to space through a multi-launch contract. So today is actually the first launch of that contract. Launch is scheduled for 16:22 UTC or 9:22 a.m. PDT. Eastern Time, where I'm located here, it should be 12:22. I see that my launch window notification at the bottom of my stream has reverted back. Let me change that for you. 12:22. Okay, that is now accurate. So this mission has a short launch window early in the morning, as payloads need to be placed into an orbit with a specific local time of descending node, or LTDN. The window is 27 minutes long. So this is not an instantaneous launch window. This is a 27-minute long launch window, which is good to see here. As I stated, last time that Astra launched, they unfortunately had a failed launch. They got their first stage up to the appropriate altitude. Everything went well with the first stage based on what we could tell, but there was an issue with the second stage. There was actually two different issues experienced. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but this is just a comment from Astra about their last launch. We experienced an issue during today's flight that resulted in the payloads not being delivered to orbit. We're deeply sorry to our customers, NASA, and the small satellite teams. More information will be provided after complete review. Again, this is the last launch they had. This has nothing to do with today. But of course, Astra had to do an investigation to figure out what had happened in order to launch again. So before that they're able to launch again, clearly they're trying today, they had to figure out what happened here, and they had to put in some mechanisms to fix those issues. So it's exciting to see them launching so quickly here. So this is an excerpt from ASTRA.com. This is the official ASTRA.com website. So you can go here to see more about what had happened during that failed launch. But there was a couple different things. The payload fairing, which kind of is the casing over the satellites that are going to be deployed, didn't actually fully deploy. There was some issue that kept that fairing from fully separating from the vehicle. So when the upper stage ignited, that fairing was still attached, which was not what was supposed to be happening. In addition to that issue with the payload fairing not coming off, they actually had an issue with there was a software issue with the upper stage. So because that they couldn't use the thrust vector control system, which is what kind of orients the second stage and which direction it should be heading. Since they weren't able to use that, unfortunately, that second stage kind of tumbled out of control. So they did not successfully deploy those satellites to orbit. But they are really showing promising trends if they are able to successfully launch today. The fact that they think that they figured out the root cause of these issues, implemented some fixes, and are comfortable enough to launch today is really exciting. So that's great. I have a couple more things that I want to touch base with you before launch here, but let's just check to make sure that launch is still scheduled. So as of right now, the stream is stating that we're waiting for NASA spaceflight to start. So that is a good sign that launch is still going according to plan. In the event that there is no launch today, they do have another launch window scheduled for tomorrow, but we're going to be hoping they launch here in the next hour or so. There is more information on the ASTRA.com website about this contract that they are launching today, so definitely check that out if you're interested. It has more information about what Spaceflight Inc. does and what they're launching satellites for and what they want to get from these satellites. Today's launch, they're actually going to be delivering satellites to sun-synchronous orbit, which is a specific type of orbit that certain satellites require in order to do their jobs. We'll talk more about sun-synchronous orbit here shortly. If you watched the last launch, you'll know that it was the first launch from this launch company, Astra, at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Today, they are not launching from Florida. They are launching from the Pacific Spaceport Complex, which is actually in Alaska. So you'll see here, this is the launch complex, and we can scroll out, and it's way out here in Alaska. So pretty interesting launch site. Not really one that looks very easy to get to go see a launch live, but if you could, I would imagine it would be really beautiful. So very cool. Let's just check one more time. We're still waiting for NASA spaceflight to start. Let's check a couple of Twitter accounts just to make sure everything is still scheduled. There is no update from Astra, which is a good sign that the launch stream should be starting very shortly, and we should be seeing some launch coverage start from NASA spaceflight very shortly here. Let me just check in and see if there's any questions with chat. Does not look like we have any questions at this time. As I said, if you have any interest in asking any questions about today's launch, about Astra, about any spaceflight topic at all, please just feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I'll do my best to answer those. And I'd love to actually hear where you're watching from. So if you wouldn't mind just posting in the comments, where you're watching from, that's super helpful for me. It's really important to know who my audience is, so I can adjust streams accordingly. So thanks so much for tuning in so far. If you don't know about NASA spaceflight, they are not associated with NASA, actually. They're a separate organization that covers media and launch videos. They're a group of people that have gotten together and provide some really, really amazing coverage of live launches, what's happening in the space industry, really across the whole industry. They do some really impressive work. So it's really awesome that they are allowing people to use their stream for commentary today. And we've seen this before on all of the Astra launches so far. So that's really great of them. I really much appreciate that. It's really good to see. Let's set my launch indicator here. Maybe. I'll have to check to see if maybe it's not plugged in. But usually I have this thing set to green if we're still go for launch. While we're waiting, there is some more space news I'd like to talk about. And that is the SLS rocket. So if you're not caught up on what the SLS rocket is, it's NASA's next rocket that is supposed to deliver astronauts to the moon and potentially even Mars someday. So a lot of people may say that this is the successor of the space shuttle. NASA stopped the space shuttle missions years ago. This is their next rocket, and a lot of people think that this is the next step after the shuttle, which is true. But I like to think about it as more of a successor of the Apollo 5 rocket. The space shuttle was only designed for a low Earth orbit, and Earth orbit in general, pretty low Earth orbit. I think the highest they went was the Hubble. But this rocket is like the Saturn V, is designed to go much further than low Earth orbit. It's designed to go into Earth or Moon orbit. It's designed to bring astronauts to the moon. It can also deliver astronauts to Mars. So it's really exciting to see this rocket take shape after many, many years. It's been in development for a long time now. But the good news is this thing's almost ready for launch. They're actually going to be rolling out a fully built and put together SLS rocket out to the launch pad for testing this Thursday. So as you can see here, this is in the vehicle assembly building that we all know and love, that big white building with the NASA meatball on the side of it. And this is an SLS fully stacked, ready to go. So this will be rolled out of the vehicle assembly building on these giant mobile carriers and brought out to the launch pad. Once they get to the launch pad, they're going to do a full dress rehearsal, which is pretty much they're going to do everything required for a launch up till T-0, and then they're not going to launch it, but they're going to do everything up to that point. And if everything goes according to plan and that goes really well, then we should see some scheduled dates for when this thing is going to launch for real. Now, I know I was saying that the SLS I like to think of more as like the successor of the Saturn V instead of the shuttle, but what's really cool about the SLS is it actually uses a lot of the shuttle-derived hardware. I personally never got to see a space shuttle launch, so for me, I really want to go see this in person because I want to see those RS-25 engines that were used as the space shuttle main engines, and especially those two big solid rocket boosters on the side. Now, there's a lot of opinions in the industry about, the future of SLS, and it is not a reusable rocket, and what's going to happen with this rocket after a few years and after a few launches. That all remains to be seen. We'll have to see about that, but I know it's going to be an exciting launch to see live, so that's my plan. I'm gonna go try to see that thing live. Checking in with the launch here. Still waiting for NASA Spaceflight to go live. Let's check back on some Twitter accounts, make sure we're still scheduled. Oops, Astra. No further updates from Astra, which I still believe is good news. So we're still scheduled for launch here in just under an hour. And when the launch coverage starts, we'll obviously bring up the full screen of the stream here. NASA Spaceflight will provide their intro, and I'll be here for additional commentary and answering any questions that anybody has. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the fact that Astra is launching today, and oh, here we go. Excuse the ad here. Let's go full screen on me so you don't have to pay attention to this ad. Okay, NASA Spaceflight is going live. And while they are preparing to go live, if anybody is seeing any issues with my own stream, please feel free to let me know. If you have any audio issues or video issues, just drop a comment in so I know. It's very helpful. Here we go.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight down to SC off. Bring in SC off.
And I'll be right back.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Good morning and welcome everybody. You are looking at a live view of launch vehicle 0009 out on the launch pad in Kodiak Island, Alaska. The Astra teams are just about T-minus 42 minutes away from conducting a launch attempt with the goal of launching multiple payloads for Spaceflight Incorporated. We are coming to you live today from Astra's headquarters in Alameda, California.
Okay, so if you're looking into the stream here, if you just saw that shot from the launch pad, it didn't look like the weather was great. It looked like some rain or some sleet or something happening. It sounds like they're about 40 minutes away from T-0, 41 minutes and 45 seconds. I'm hoping that they'll still be able to launch in this weather, so we'll listen for any updates from them. And what else do you see here on the stream? So you see a lot of this vapor coming out. This is a good sign. This means that they are actively fueling the rocket, or the rocket has been fueled. Basically, the more of that vapor you see, the more of that rocket fuel that's boiling off. They're continuously topping that off. But yeah, let's check in with what's happening here and how the weather is.
As you can see from that frosty white middle third of the rocket, propellant has been loaded onto the vehicle. We are closely monitoring the weather this morning, in particular triggered lightning. So we will keep you posted as we hear any updates, but we're keeping a close eye on the weather and no other issues this morning.
So that's very good. No technical issues that they're currently working. They are looking at that weather. Doesn't look great to me, but well, I don't know the constraints of this vehicle. For all I know, they may be able to launch in this rain. The good news about today's launch is it is not an instantaneous launch window. Oftentimes, when you're delivering a payload to orbit, it has to be launched at exactly the right second of the day in order to successfully get to the right orbit. There's certain orbits and certain orbital inclinations and all these things that you have kind of a wider range of time that you can launch during. So today is a 27-minute window. So if for some reason the weather doesn't look great, they may be able to push the T-0 all the way to the end of that launch window to see if there's any improvement in the weather. And if they do have to scrub today for weather, there is another launch attempt tomorrow. But we'll keep updated here with what's happening.
It's our first launch with Spaceflight, a premier launch services provider, and we are very excited to be working with Spaceflight on this mission and future missions.
The Spaceflight team joined the ASTRA team here at the headquarters in California to take a look at the payload deployment testing and things like that, and we actually have a quick video to show about the Spaceflight and ASTRA partnership.
One thing that Astra and Spaceflight have in common is that we're trying to get multiple different types of satellites into space that will benefit the Earth.
So the core business and the mission of Spaceflight is really to open up access to space to areas that were previously underserved or have sort of unique needs.
Spaceflight has a unique ability of aggregating various satellites into a single launch, and Astra has the ability to take multiple different types of satellites that have multiple different requirements and catering to each of those requirements to get those satellites into space.
I think Astra and Spaceflight can work together very well in the future. Our customers all want the same thing, right? Which is customizability and an increased cadence. So Astra's goals to scale up and to offer higher capability is something that we at Spaceflight will also value. As Astra and Spaceflight work together and build this bond, we can increase efficiency in our sort of processes so that it becomes a bit more of a well-oiled machine.
Our future launches with Spaceflight will give us that ability to work with even more different types of satellites and provide different functions to help improve life on Earth.
And I'm now joined by Amanda Dirk-Fry, Senior Manager for First Stage Production at Astra. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
So got a couple questions for you.
I'll fix my cam here so we're not blocking them.
As the production manager, what are your responsibilities here at Astra?
So just like any role here at Astra, it's certainly very multifaceted, but I do like to break it down into three main areas, and that is the people, the build, and the factory itself. So being a manager here at Astra, I'm first and foremost a people leader. And so a lot of time is spent just connecting with the individuals, working on development goals, making sure that they're challenged in a right way that really energizes them. That's really going to be the way that we are successful in our mission, is to make sure that we really have empowered team members who are building and working on our rockets. And then there's the vehicle build. So the first stage production team currently has around 20 team members who weld, drill, rivet, integrate, and test, take the vehicle from engineering drawing to reality. And as a production manager, it's not only my responsibility to understand the overall bill of materials, but also what design changes are coming through from engineering, and figuring out how those changes are going to make their way onto all the vehicles that are currently on the production line, since at any given time, we might have multiple vehicles on our line. And with that comes such an important need to document everything that we're doing. So working extensively with our quality and manufacturing engineering teams to make sure all the photos are taken of everything that we're doing, that our notes are really extensive. That way we can take a snapshot in time of what work has been performed on the vehicle, so we can go back later and assess kind of where we were with the build process. And then lastly, it's also the coordination of all of those efforts. We have really tight build schedules and really tight launch operations that we have to make sure the vehicle is ready for. And then also the factory is that last responsibility. So here at Astra, we actually treat our factory as a product. So with the production manager.
In the meantime, I do want to show you one quick animation. And this is of how a sun-synchronous orbit works. So again, these satellites today are going to be launched to a sun-synchronous orbit. This video, who has been put out by cloud.tube, I'm not exactly sure of this source, but this is an animation that shows the orbits of NASA's fleet of Earth remote sensing observations as of February 14th. These satellites are also in sun-synchronous orbit. So basically, I think the orbit adjusts like 1 degree every day or something like that, in order to kind of keep track of the sun changes in the sun. So when it goes over a specific point on the planet today, it'll go over the same point tomorrow with the same sun angle. So there's different applications for why you might want that, but really interesting to see that. So you know, check out this animation if you want to see more, and there's plenty of articles to see some good descriptions about how sun-synchronous orbit works, but it's an interesting one for sure. It's not your usual low Earth orbit that just kind of goes over different parts of the planet at different times every day. So.
And there are primary harnesses as well as plumbing lines. Moving forward to the aft end, there's also the interstage. That's the conical white section that has the Astra star and the flag on it. So that's where a lot of our avionics are housed. And it's also the primary means of holding on to the upper stage during flight. And then once main engine cutoff happens and after the fairing separation, the interstage is what releases the upper stage. And then lastly, at the forward end, those are the 2 fairings. And so my team has 2 main sub-teams underneath it, the integration and the structure.
It actually looks like the weather already has improved quite a bit. At the beginning of the stream, we saw some really heavy-looking rainfall, and now we're getting a better shot of the pad here. It doesn't look like there's as much rain. If you do look up at that light, though, it does look like there's still some rainfall happening. So while it might not be as heavy, it still looks like it's happening. It does look like we have the sun coming up, though. Of course, this is way out on the west coast. This is actually in Alaska. So the sun is just rising now. So we'll see when the sun rises here in the next few minutes if we'll get a good indication of, you know, how cloudy it is and if it looks like they'll have issues launching today or not.
You see up to the left, and then we'll load all of that into a box and send it on its way. So essentially the first stage is a lot of what you see here. So it's a pretty wide, pretty broad area of involvement on the production floor here, and it's essentially the vehicle.
So Astra has had, I believe, 7 launches up to this point. The last launch, unfortunately, did fail after deploying second stage, but they did reach orbit successfully the launch before that. So the first stage of this rocket has been performing really well the last couple launches. The issues from last launch was just with that second stage. So hopefully today we see another successful deployment of the second stage by the first stage. And then hopefully we see the second stage kick off, we see those fairings deploy nominally, and hopefully we get a good launch here today. Astra definitely needs a solid, successful launch under their belt. So let's hope that happens today.
And part of that is to include the manufacturing and production team as early in the process as possible. So my build technicians are encouraged to provide feedback to the engineering team of, like, they are building on the floor, and if something can be done a little bit better or if a part can be refined a little bit, they'll provide that feedback to the engineering team, and that'll be incorporated into the design. particularly on those production processes that really enable us to scale to production levels that are unprecedented in the industry. And materials, so we're not working with exotic materials that are difficult to come by or take a long time to manufacture. Over 95% of our bill of materials contains non-single source, easy to manufacture materials that are equally as easy to use and form on the factory floor. And that said too, the processes are that third item. And so we're really using tried and true forming and joining processes that are standard in the aerospace, marine, or even automotive industries. So it's about really optimization, about how we utilize our engineering and manufacturing resources and looking at simple scales. The production process is about taking a sophisticated design and really breaking it down into smaller, more manageable build operations that are reliable and repeatable. And really it comes down to hiring the right talent also to really own those key production areas. And for that key talent, that's such a crucial part of your team, what kind of backgrounds and skill sets are you looking for when you expand your team? Sure, that's an excellent question, since we are constantly hiring here at Astra. This past year we held several really successful hiring events, and upcoming in 2022 we'll definitely be holding more of those events.
And if you're just joining us, we are waiting for launch of Astra's rocket today. They are planning to launch here in T-minus 30 minutes and 25 seconds. There is no issues that they are working with the vehicle right now. However, they are looking at some weather concerns. But just looking by what we see on the stream here, it does look like to be slowly clearing up. Obviously, I'm not sure if there's other cells moving in or anything, but we'll stay tuned and see how the weather improves here in the next 30 minutes or so. My name is Andrew. This is Solid Rocket Future. We're here to cover the most exciting parts of human spaceflight and rocketry. Now, today's launch is not a crewed launch, but it is an exciting one. Astra is a relatively new launch provider. Unfortunately, they did have a failure on the last launch, so we're hoping to see a successful launch here by Astra. And if they are able to succeed today, that's going to be a really exciting thing to see. It's really important for us to have multiple providers to bring our payloads to space. It really is important that we're not single-threaded in this industry. We have to be deploying these important satellites up to Earth orbit. You know, we're talking about Earth observation satellites that help us here down on Earth by observing climate changes. There's so many reasons why it's important to have these redundant ways to get to space. So we're hoping to see this thing launch. We're hoping to see it successful, and we're going to be really excited if it's flawless here today. So we're standing by, and hopefully we'll get an update here about weather shortly.
That he thanked me for hiring him, and so that's that's the passion that I love to see on our team here. That's awesome. I do actually have one more question for you, and it's because I think you have another story to show. The team tells me that there was an interesting moment recently around the birth of your baby girl. Yes. So I guess to back up a little bit, I did find out that I was expecting the day before I started at Astra. Okay. And so I was joining a very, very fast-paced startup since this was before we went public last year. So I was drudging through those really slow first months of pregnancy while facing this type of environment, which is a challenge in of itself. Fast forward a few months, and we were a few days away from shipping LV0009. And I was with my team on the production floor finishing up the aft end of the rocket when my water broke. And it was 6 weeks early, too, so totally unexpected. But it was fantastic to see my team jump into action. I felt like all of them...
Wow, imagine that. That's crazy.
Right then and there. Gosh. Thankfully, it didn't come to that, but it was my little one was born a few days later. It's a very exciting time on the production floor here. Oh, there you go. There she is. That's little AJ wearing her...
See how Astra is spelled ASTRA, so that's cool. I wonder if the company sells that as merchandise, but of course that's a play on the company name Astra, who is launching today. That's cool. I like that.
She wasn't supposed to be out yet, but we were able to watch the launch as a family. That's very cool. Yeah. Amanda.
In the meantime here, while we're waiting for updates on launch, the T-0 clock is still counting down. So as of right now, everything is still go for launch. We're T-minus 27 minutes and 16 seconds. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I'm going to do my best to answer those for you. Otherwise, just let me know where you're watching from. It's really helpful and just interesting for me to know where the audience is watching from, and yeah, we're hoping to see this thing launch here in just a few minutes. Check out our website as well if you'd like to keep up with the rest of our socials. We're on Twitter and all of the things. We got a Discord where we chat about space, or we chat about games, or we chat about anything. So feel free to drop in the Discord. You'll also get notifications on the Discord if you choose to about when we're going live. Here on our YouTube, we cover, again, I'm going to say it one more time, the most exciting parts of human spaceflight and rocketry. So the big exciting launches we host here on our YouTube. But if you love launch coverage and if you just can't get enough and want to see more of it, you can check out our Twitch as well. We generally speaking host more launches on our Twitch, but those are usually the more frequent, not as groundbreaking launches. So like Starlink launches we'll cover on our Twitch, or ULA launches for like Air Force, stuff like that. We're reserving streams on this channel for like SLS, for Starship, new launch vehicles, Astra, Rocket Lab, stuff like that. So yeah, that's just the pitch for where you can find all of our information. So definitely feel free to check any of that out. But for now, thanks for sticking by. We are T-minus 25 minutes waiting for this thing to take off and deliver a successful payload to orbit.
And welcome back to our coverage. Again, T-minus 25 minutes and counting, and we're keeping an eye on weather, so a lot of these questions coming in have to do with that. So let's start here. Jonah asks, what are the chances of violation today? Astra is known for multi-hour launch windows. Today, only a 27-minute launch window. But is Astra still capable of having an extended hold or something if they're waiting for a weather criteria?
Sure. So we do have a very short launch window today. The chances of the triggered lightning causing a violation are relatively high this morning, so we are keeping a close eye on that. We would only be able to hold or recycle within our launch window this morning, which again is very short due to the mission requirements for the local time of the descending node, or LTDN.
We got some movement on their camera too, so I would imagine there's some wind involved here. Sounds like the main issue is lightning. So they're waiting to make sure that they don't have any lightning strikes. So they still got 24 minutes, and we'll hope to see this clear up a bit.
The rocket on the ground, although it does make work a little tougher for our red team, our team of field engineers who is up in Kodiak, and we are very grateful for them working in those conditions to help keep our launch site set up on time and safe.
What you're seeing here on the right side of the rocket is this truss structure. That is what they kind of roll out the rocket with in a horizontal shape. So the rocket sits on that truss, they roll it out, and then it goes vertical. There is a bunch of tubes and pipes and wires that are going from that truss structure onto the rocket. Those are umbilicals that deliver all the stuff that they need for the rocket prior to liftoff. So that's information, data streams, cables for information. Fueling happens through that, electricity, all that stuff. So eventually, when it's closer to launch, the rocket switches over to battery power and no longer gets its power from those umbilicals. And then right before launch, I think you might even see that structure drop back even further. So this is a further zoomed out shot of the launch pad. You can see the rocket way down there on the bottom there, and you can see what looks like a giant mountain behind it, or is that clouds? Hard to tell. Looks like a beautiful area to see a launch, though.
The recent launch failure, of course, LV0009 not reaching.
They're going to talk a little bit about their launch failure here. Let's listen in.
I actually talked a lot about the investigation and the results from that. Can you tell us a little bit about what has been changed to prepare for this mission?
Right. So first of all, I'll plug our blog. If you visit astra.com, you can read a really excellent post by Andrew Griggs, our Senior Director of Mission Management, who talked about the failure investigation process as well as what we learned after the flight of LV0008. And there were two issues. One was that the payload fairing didn't separate fully after or right around the time of upper stage ignition. And that was due to an error in an engineering drawing that caused the separation mechanisms, which there are 5 on that fairing, to deploy in the incorrect order. And the other issue is a software problem that resulted in the upper stage engine being unable to use its thrust vector control system, which was ultimately due to an issue with packet loss. So both of these issues our team was able to work very thoroughly to identify. On the fairing harness, we were able to fix that incorrect engineering harness drawing and incorporate that change throughout our system. And we also implemented a new end-of-the-line signal test to help us mitigate this issue prior to launch.
If you want to learn more details about what they're talking about right now, you can definitely check out the ASTRA.com official website. They provide this really amazing blog about what had happened and what they did to try to resolve it. Really encouraging to see that they were able to resolve this so quickly and get back on the launch pad. It would be really awesome if they are able to have a successful launch today and deploy to orbit. I do think if for any reason that they have any issues with launch today, which I'm hoping they don't, but I'm wondering if people will ask if this root cause investigation was rushed. I'm not suggesting that it was rushed, but if you see a launch failure on one of these launch vehicles, it usually takes a year or more to get back on the launch pad. Now, we've seen Rocket Lab have some problems at points, and they were able to get their rocket back on the pad relatively quickly, and we're seeing this with Astra as well. So just because that this feels different doesn't mean that it's worse. It just means that it's different. They're using a different strategy, and I'm hoping that they're able to get this thing launched up into orbit, and that everything that went wrong is completely fixed. It would be really awesome.
RPX, which is essentially kind of a mineral spirit, a highly refined form of kerosene. We use the same propellants for both engines.
Mm-hmm. And keeping the questions coming, let's see. Is there onboard video, or do you have a good data relay coverage for this launch? I believe we should expect some onboard camera views, and there you have it. This view is on the first stage of the rocket, looking up towards the upper stage, and the payload's mounted on top.
This is a great place to have a camera inside the rocket here. So when the first stage delivers the second stage up to space, and then the second stage eventually will ignite, we should get a live view inside that payload fairing when those fairings come apart and expose the satellite to space. That should always be a really beautiful shot. And the video feeds that came back from Astra's last launch were really gorgeous. Again, unfortunately, that did result in a failure, but it goes to show you that they're providing great launch footage. So we should see those again today if this launches. The weather, the sun is coming up. The weather is looking better to me. So hopefully they'll provide another update on weather here shortly. But as of right now, the T-0 countdown is still going. So everything is still good. T-minus 18 minutes and 15 seconds until launch. Look at that launch site. That looks absolutely beautiful. Kind of reminds me of the New Zealand launch site that Rocket Lab uses. As you can see, the rocket is still nice and frosty, which means it is loaded up with fuel, and this thing is ready to go as soon as the team's kind of determined that everything is safe to move forward and launch in just over 17 minutes. And while we wait for this countdown to proceed towards T-0, I do just want to let you know that I am going to be down at Starbase in Texas from the 19th until April 2nd. So if you'd like to follow our Twitter at solid_RKTfuture, really it's just easier to go to rocketfuture.org and you can get our link to our socials socials there. But you'll be able to follow our Twitter and in this YouTube channel here for updates from Starbase. I'll be producing some videos while I'm down there, and hopefully some semi-daily updates from what's happening down at Starbase. Starbase is where SpaceX is building their Starship vehicle, their exploration class rocket, which will bring astronauts to the moon and to Mars someday. Really exciting stuff happening down there, and you can get right up and close and see it all with your own eyes. So I'll be down there doing that, and I'll be hoping to spread that word to all y'all, and show you what's happening down there. So again, just check out rocketfuture.org to get links to my socials, and you can follow along with all those updates from Starbase.
Demonstrated following the LV0008 mission.
I also have a question here from Jonah talking about the payloads on today's flight, asking, since today's payload will not be separated from the fairing, how many of those systems resulting from LV-8 be tested on this vehicle? To be clear, first and foremost, only one of the payloads on today's mission is not being deployed. There is the S4 crossover payload from Near Space Launch. That is a hosted payload that'll stay on the upper stage and operate from there for a couple weeks. But the other payloads on board today's mission will be deployed like normal satellites, including the Portland State Aerospace Society's ORSAT-0 payload, in addition to other non-disclosed payloads at this time. So, but resulting from that, I mean, any systems that are different or not going to be tested on today's flight because of that hosted payload?
That system, the hosted payload, is entirely self-powered, so we expect everything to proceed as normal. We've completed our standard battery of tests on these vehicles. And we've just received a notice that we are holding the clock at T-minus 15 minutes for weather.
Okay, so what we just heard is that the clock is being held at T-minus 14 minutes and 56 seconds. Right now, this does not mean that the launch is scrubbed. This is not an announcement that the launch is canceled so far. Again, they have a 27-minute launch window. So I think the teams will look at the weather now and see if they can push that T-minus 0 further into the launch window, potentially towards the end of that window, and decide if they can go for launch here. So the Astra teams are going to be looking very closely at the weather here, and we should hear an update here shortly. In the event that it doesn't launch today, the Astra teams do have another launch opportunity tomorrow.
A sun-synchronous orbit, we're going to an inclination of 97.5 degrees and 525 kilometer altitude for the Spaceflight ASTRA-1 mission today.
And that kind of mission profile dictates the launch site you're going to, right? Because this is one of 2 launch sites that Astra currently has active, and Kodiak lends itself to those high inclination, those polar orbits.
Yes, that's exactly right. So one of the great advantages of working with Kodiak and launching out of Kodiak is the easy access to those polar and sun-synchronous orbits. So I want to just take a moment to shout out to our partners, the Alaska Aerospace Corporation, the Pacific Spaceport Complex Alaska, and everyone in Kodiak that has.
You can see at the top of the rocket there's a little triangle on the payload fairing. That's actually the Spaceflight Inc. logo. They may provide another up-close shot of that, but Astra likes to. A lot of rocket companies like to host a logo on the payload fairings for whatever payloads they're deploying, which is really cool.
It will stay on the upper stage. It's a technology demonstration mission for a type of payload host platform. And what this payload will test supporting future payloads and has a lot of environmental instruments to help characterize radiation and plasma density. As we mentioned, it is self-powered and operates completely independently of the Astra system, and it will remain permanently attached starting from when the system turns on after second stage engine cutoff, or SECO. And the other payload we'll highlight is the Portland State Aerospace Society's ORSAT-0, which is a fully open source CubeSat satellite system, which was built from scratch by students at Portland State University. It is slated to be Oregon's first satellite, and it's a 1U CubeSat that provides flight heritage for a modular, expandable, open source, and education-friendly ORSAT bus, and paving the way for a future 2U CubeSat with a global climate science and STEM outreach mission. So those are two of the payloads on board today that we are very excited to highlight. And again, this is our first mission with Spaceflight, the launch services provider. We are very excited to be working with them on this Spaceflight ASTRA-1 mission.
And looking forward to future missions as well, part of a multi-launch agreement between Spaceflight and Astra. Spaceflight, a very prevalent commercial mission manager for many different launch vehicles, now including Astra's Rocket 3.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that these launch vehicles get kind of recurring launch contracts. Really important to the success of these new launch vehicles and these companies that are developing them. I've said it a couple times this stream, and I'll keep saying it. Really important to have multiple launch vehicles to deliver these payloads to space. Redundancy is key. When Spaceflight Inc. and companies like Spaceflight Inc. Book multiple launches on one of these new launch vehicles, it really helps these companies survive, especially if they've had some trouble getting to orbit. We've all heard it. Space is hard. These launch companies are going to experience failures from time to time. In the last couple decades, only a couple companies that are U.S. built have actually deployed payloads to orbit successfully. Rocket Lab is one. Astra is one. It's a rare thing, so it's good to see them having some backing, and hopefully they'll get even more backing as they continue to deploy satellites.
Be almost smoking in that frosty white area. That is liquid oxygen. That is our liquid oxygen tank, which, due to the moisture in the atmosphere, has some condensation and appears to be smoking. It's kind of similar to if you pull ice cream out of the freezer on a warm day, you can kind of see that ice cream container look like it has some smoke coming off it. That's exactly what you're seeing happen right now. Is just this very, very cold substance here that is letting off steam.
And we could actually use that as an indicator of where the different fuel tanks are, because the liquid oxygen is of course very cold, so that part of the tank is where that frost is forming. But at the bottom of the rocket you can see just the bare metal skin without that frost building up, and that's because the kerosene fuel, the RPX that's being used, is at ambient temperature, right? That's not chilled anymore than ambient temperature, and so it doesn't generate that frost.
Yes, exactly. So the liquid oxygen tank is that upper part of the first stage, kind of the middle third of the overall integrated vehicle, and then you have the fuel tank beneath that, which is why you can see that aluminum.
Another question here from Brandon, who asks, as a shareholder, can I request to view a launch at the Cape?
There are actually plenty of great launch viewing locations from the Cape.
Yeah, on this topic, actually, I do want to say that if space is something you're interested in, and rockets are something that you're interested in, and you haven't gone to see a live launch, you really gotta. It's such an amazing experience to see live. It's one of those things that you go to see live, and you expect it to be a really cool visual thing. You might expect it to be a cool, the sound to be really exciting as well. But really, the sound will be way cooler than you could ever imagine. It's so much more impactful than you would imagine. In addition to just how cool it is to see audio and visually, it just kind of blows your mind. Just seeing something, you're staring at this rocket that's on the launch pad for a couple hours waiting for this thing to get prepared for launch and eventually launch. You're just staring at this thing on the pad, and then eventually it takes off, and you're just watching it bring its payload to space. Eventually, you no longer can see the rocket in the sky, and then you kind of look back at the launch pad, and that rocket that you've been staring at for 2 hours is just gone. It's just not there anymore. And for me, at least, in the brain, it just kind of hits in a really interesting way. And it's just like, what did I just watch? I just watched something really amazing. So highly recommend it. Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center is just about an hour away from Disney. So if you're planning a trip to Disney, if you're in the States here, it's worth a trip out to Kennedy to see a launch if there's one. They're happening almost like every week at this point. And even if there's not a launch, they do have a visitor complex there, a museum where you can see one of the old shuttles and a Saturn V. Very, very highly recommend that. And there is launch sites kind of all over the country and all over the world. In the United States, there's Florida, California, Virginia, some potential launches in Texas, depending on how FAA goes down there. And there is launches across different countries in the world as well. So definitely recommend going to see one. Let's check in for any update.
Some Astra merchandise.
Well, we're very happy to share that we have opened the Astra shop. The Astra shop is now live at shop.astra.com, and we are also especially excited to share that for the next 2 weeks, we will be donating 100% of the profits to charities offering humanitarian services in Ukraine right now. So visit shop.astra.com, and you can see what we have available. We have a pretty small selection right now, like we always like to do. We like to learn and iterate. So
that's really amazing to see them providing support for Ukraine through merch sales. As we all know, that situation with Ukraine is terrible, and the what can you do? What can you say? So to see companies that are donating up to 100% of proceeds to different causes in Ukraine is really great. So at the moment, I'd say go buy some Astra merch. I mean, maybe if you just want to donate straight to one of those funds instead, it's probably going to be more impactful. But if you weren't otherwise going to donate, but you do want some Astra merch, it seems like a great way to help out what's happening in Ukraine. Of course, our heart goes out to everybody in Ukraine, and it's just an amazingly terrible situation, and I can't believe it's even happening. But today, I guess we'll watch this launch, and we'll just take it day by day.
Harder to see because both the fuel and the oxidizer are both chilled, so you can't actually tell which tank is which. But on the Astra rocket, it's nice and visible.
Yes, and we do, again, use the same propellants on both stages, which is another way we keep our design really, really simple to help scale our system and operations.
Again, if you are just joining us, the clock is still holding at T-minus 15 minutes. We're standing by to hear word about the weather criteria for today. Whether it has caused the hold, no technical issues being worked, but the triggered lightning criteria has been a concern for today's countdown. Let's go ahead and listen in and take a view at the launchpad views while we wait for more information on that. Again, we'll share that as soon as we have it.
One thing to keep note here is the original T-minus 0 countdown clock, which is now paused at T-minus 14 minutes and 56 seconds. That was aiming to launch at the beginning of the 27-minute launch window. So we've been paused here for at least 5 minutes, if not close to 10. So if we're going to see a launch here today, we're going to hear an update in the next 5 or 10 minutes. If we don't hear, I think we're going to hear one way or the other. In the next 10 minutes, we're going to know if this thing's going to launch today or not. Because if this hold lasts more than 27 minutes, then they're not launching. But right now, there's no indication that they have scrubbed for the day. Right now, they are just looking at weather, and if the weather looks good, they're going to resume that T-minus 0 clock, and the launch will still happen. So Astra hasn't provided an update beyond what we just heard, so we're just standing by to hear any updates that they do provide about today's weather. So hopefully they'll get off the ground today. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Let's tune back in here. definitely some low clouds going on. If you kind of look at the mountains in the background, you can kind of see the cloud layer, and it looks pretty low. But they did express that they don't have a lot of concerns about the current clouds or even some of the rain that's happening right now. They said the rain, obviously impacts their ability to work at the pad, but it doesn't necessarily provide a risk for a successful launch. So what we can see here on the left-hand side is mission control. This is a camera we see pretty much every Astra launch lately. So those are the teams that are looking at all of the criteria for launch today. They're looking at all of the sensors that are coming back from the rocket, the data from those sensors to make sure everything looks like it's within bounds, that's successful for launch. They're looking at that weather and determining if they're going to have a launch opportunity here. Again, we should hear, I'd say in the next 5 minutes, whether this thing's going to go off or not. I don't think they'll have us hang more than 5 minutes here without an update. In the meantime, I do want to show you one thing that kind of shows you the scale of this rocket. What we're looking at here is the everydayastronaut.com official website. This is everydayastronaut.com. This infographic was created by the Everyday Astronaut team, and they have the rights to this image here. It's a really useful tool to show the scale of this rocket. So we got the Falcon 9, which we're all familiar with. We see this thing launch on streams pretty much every week. This is what delivers most of the payload to orbit as of lately. Big rocket, 70 meters. Of course, compared to things like the Saturn V or SLS or Starship, this is not a big rocket, but it really is. It's a big, powerful rocket, 70 meters. Now, all the way on the left-hand side here, at 11.6 meters, is the Astra rocket. So this thing's real small compared to that big Falcon 9. So it's not delivering the same type of payloads to orbit. The Falcon 9 could potentially deliver these payloads to orbit.
So if you are just joining us, we're
tune
still
in
holding a
with an
T-minus
update.
15 minutes due to a weather criteria. You notice the countdown is pretty quiet. The teams are still waiting for some weather data to confirm whether or not the launch attempt can proceed for today. Again, the launch window extends until 9:51 a.m. Pacific time or 16:51 UTC, and that means that we should get a decision one way or another within the next 15 minutes or so. So we're going to keep you updated on that, and as soon as they have that data and make that decision, we'll of course share that with you. But we do have some more questions coming in, and one is pertaining to the weather situation.
Very good. So yeah, that's the size comparison for you there. They're actually talking a little bit more about this triggered lightning criteria, so let's listen in.
Encounters electrically charged fields in the atmosphere. It can act as a giant lightning rod and can cause lightning to strike the vehicle and potentially damage it and risk the mission. So unfortunately, it's not something that we have a lot of control over,
right,
just like the rest of the weather. But it is a pretty unique phenomenon, and that's what we are keeping track of today.
Of course, if you're a regular NASA Spaceflight viewer and you listen really closely to the intro reel, the SCE to AUX call out from Apollo 12, I believe. I hope I got that mission right. Oh God, my Apollo history isn't the best. But that was actually a lightning strike that occurred during launch and caused all sorts of electrical issues. So those weather criteria are developed over years and years of launch experience and apply to all the rockets that are launched from various launch ranges around the world. So again, the teams are looking into that triggered lightning criteria and will let us know as soon as they make a decision one way or the other. Still holding and holding out for a launch attempt today. If things do end up not going that way today and we need to target a new launch attempt, when is the next launch window, Carolina?
So we do have another launch window tomorrow at the same time. So that is 1622 to 1651 UTC or 9:22 to 9:51 a.m. Pacific time. So we do have another launch opportunity at the same time tomorrow. It is still that same shortened window due to the requirements of this mission. The payload's heading to an orbit with a specific local time of the descending node, or LTDN, which is dictating.
And if you missed this earlier, I did just want to highlight again the unique launch pad that Astra has here. This is the Pacific Spaceport Complex. So it looks like a relatively small launch complex, but it's in a really unique place. So it's on an island here out off the side of Alaska. So we got a wildlife refuge out here. We got the small island off of the south tip of Alaska. So what an amazing place to launch a rocket. Like, I can't imagine how it must feel to be out there and see this with your own eyes out on that island in Alaska. Really unique. It would be such an incredible experience to go check that out. So we'll check back in here and hope we see a launch here. As stated, we should be hearing really soon about whether or not this thing's going to happen today.
It's still very useful because it has really good access to those polar high inclination orbits, the sun-synchronous orbit that today's mission is going to. So expected to remain a normal part of the rotation for Astra missions?
Exactly. One of the big advantages of launching from Kodiak is the orbital inclination.
So it looks like this is going to be launching southwest. If you notice the compass here, this is not a perfect north-south image. We're actually tilted here at what looks to be about a 45-degree angle. So north is, kind of 45 degrees. But yeah, this looks like a westerly, southwesterly launch leg. So you can see the warning area there, areas that no ships or anything are allowed to go through. Yeah. It's funny to hear them talk about this. They keep saying that this is a super shrunken down launch window, which is true compared to a lot of Astra's launch windows, which are hours long. But so many launches nowadays are that instantaneous launch window. You know, at 12:28:01, that's when they got to launch, and if they don't launch during that second, then they're not launching for today. This is a 27-minute launch window. That's quite more flexible than an instantaneous launch window. So really interesting to see the different strategies used here.
Aerospace Society, or SAT-0, is one of the payloads that will be deployed from today's mission. Or assuming today, if the weather cooperates, again, if you're just joining us, still waiting on some weather data, and in under 10 minutes we'll have a decision one way or the other whether the countdown can proceed, looking at the triggered lightning criteria that's affecting the countdown right now.
And I do want to ask, once per video, if you're watching on YouTube, I would really love it if you just took a moment to like the video. I know it's something you hear all the time, but it really does help a lot. I'll ask just this once, and if you could like the video, it would be so appreciated and way more helpful than you could realize. So, thank you so much.
And that 43 feet is significant because that means that our fully integrated vehicle can fit inside a 45-foot shipping container, making our system very, very flexible and portable.
And another question regarding Astra's launch systems. Does the rocket have a name other than LV0009? So there's a couple names we've thrown out there. LV0009, there's Rocket 3, Rocket 3.3. What are all those different naming conventions talking about?
Sure. So LV0009 stands for Launch Vehicle 0009. That's the tail number of the vehicle, like the tail number of an aircraft or the VIN number of your car. It's this specific version or this specific vehicle of the overall model, which is Rocket 3.3. And so Rocket.
We are very quickly approaching the moment of decision here. So within the next couple minutes, we should hear whether or not they're going to go for a launch attempt. There's not really more than a couple minutes here left in this period of uncertainty. If they go more than a few more minutes, they'll hit past the end of the launch window, and there's no shot at them going past the launch window today. So we should hear an update really soon.
Mission. So those are some of the naming conventions that we use. So LV0009 is an Astra Rocket 3.3.
Yeah, so basically there are multiple Rocket 3.3s. That's a model number that can be built many times again, but there's only ever going to be one LV0009. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, gotcha. I have a cool question in chat. We showed the trajectory a little bit earlier, and it shows that the flight is not flying east. Is that unusual? It is unusual for some missions. A lot of missions do tend to fly east from their respective launch sites because that helps you take advantage of the spin of the Earth. It actually makes it easier to reach orbit. However, for this particular mission, that would not be helpful because these payloads are going to a sun-synchronous orbit. They are intended to go to orbits that orbit kind of over the poles. It's a 97.5-degree inclination, which means that the angle between the orbit and the equator is 97.5 degrees.
Yeah, it's kind of like a general rule of thumb that if you're trying to get to low Earth orbit, the closer to the equator, the better, and you want to be launching east most of the time. Being close to the equator and launching with that direction gives you quite an advantage of getting to orbit energy-wise. A lot of time, once you get into low Earth orbit, you need additional fuel to get to your final orbit. So if it's more efficient to get to low Earth orbit, then you have more fuel in orbit to get to your final orbit. Again, this is not just going to your regular old low Earth orbit that you might see, and with a lot of these missions, this is going on a sun-synchronous orbit, so it makes more sense to launch this up near the poles, and it's not going to go east, it's going to go kind of southwest.
Question, how many stages are there on the Astra Rocket 3 vehicle?
So this is a two-stage vehicle. We have the first stage, which is powered by 5 first-stage engines that are electric pump-fed engines with 6,500 pounds of thrust. And the second stage has a single pressure-fed engine, which produces 740 pounds of thrust. We have that lovely expanded view of the system. So starting from the left, you can see those engines in the engine bay. Then we have those first stage cylindrical tanks. We have the cone-shaped interstage, and then we have the upper stage, which kind of has two spherical tanks, kind of looks like a sideways snowman, and that upper stage engine, and finally the two halves of the fairing, and that is
We are waiting for the final weather permission here. We should get a go, no-go any second.
Today, once the launch happens, how will it eventually be destroyed?
Great question. So we expect that payload, that is the Near Space Launch S4 crossover.
Another thing I want to highlight about this mission and this launch vehicle is that it is an expendable launch vehicle. We're so used to seeing reusable launch vehicles nowadays, especially with the Falcon 9 launching the most often out of all launch vehicles as of late. This is a new launch vehicle, yet it is not reusable. They're not, at the moment, they're not planning to reuse this rocket. So this is going to deliver its payload to orbit, and that's it. It's done, it's used, it'll come back down into the ocean, some of it might burn up. And that's what that is. Now, I'm really curious to see as Astra moves forward, if they continue to be a successful launch provider, if they will look at reusable options. Rocket Lab, when they developed their Electron rocket, which is kind of the most comparable rocket here, they didn't originally design it to be a reusable rocket. But then we did hear a year or two ago that they were going to move to make the Electron rocket reusable. We have seen some testing related to that, and it sounds like some of that testing may have not gone as well as they'd hoped. So Rocket Lab is continuing to investigate the best and most efficient way to recover their rocket, but they're very much planning on continuing to investigate reusability for the Electron rocket. And of course, we have heard recently that Rocket Lab's next rocket, the Neutron rocket, is going to be fully reusable. That one's really cool. I'd love to pop over and show you, highlight that rocket, but I don't want to really step out right now from the stream, because we're going to be hearing an update here on the weather really any second. But if you haven't checked out the new Neutron rocket by Rocket Lab, you got to check it out. It's really cool. But yeah, anyway, I'm wondering if Astra will move towards a reusable scheme at some point if they continue to be a successful launch provider. So interesting to see. We have no audio at the moment, and we should be hearing soon. In the event that they decide that today is not going to be the go, the launch stream will end shortly. So if you do have any questions, now's the best time to get those in. So let me know if you have any questions. The stream did freeze. That is not an issue on my side. That is an issue from their stream. So hopefully that will come back here shortly. Let me just check everything on my side too, but I think we're good. Yep, everything's okay on our side. We're still getting audio. And their video is back. If you're just joining us, we are waiting to hear a final go or no go on the weather for today's Astra launch attempt. We should be hearing this update any second.
This is Astra Flight on countdown. Astra is scrubbing for the day due to triggered lightning not improving for the rest of the launch window.
All right, there's the final word, everybody. Give me a moment here. Okay, so what we just heard from Astra Mission Control is that there is continuing concern about lightning strikes in the launch area, so they are not going for a launch today. That means that tomorrow is going to be their next launch attempt at the same time. So while we'll be ending stream here in the next couple of minutes, we do want to let you know that there will be another stream tomorrow to check on their next launch attempt of this mission. Quick summary is Astra is attempting to launch their first launch of a new contract for Spaceflight Inc, deploying their satellites to sun-synchronous orbit. Scrubbed for weather today. They'll give it another shot tomorrow, and we'll be back here to cover everything for tomorrow. So I'm just going to slowly wind down stream here, but if anybody has any questions, I will be here for another few seconds. So please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. And if you want to let me know where you watched from today, that would be super helpful as well. So yeah, we're winding down stream here in the next few seconds, but now's your last chance to get in some questions. But in the meantime, I do want to thank you for joining us today. This is Solid Rocket Future. My name is Andrew, and I'm here to cover the most exciting parts of human spaceflight and rocketry. This Astra launch was not a crewed mission, but an exciting one. Astra is a relatively new launch company. They did have a failure on the last launch, so we're really pushing behind them for a successful launch, and it's going to be really exciting when they nail that next orbital insertion. So thank you so much for watching today. So much appreciated, and I hope to see you on the next stream. All right, see ya.